First story, when the police couldn't help. It started on a Wednesday night. I remember because I was halfway through my shift at the diner when my sister Emily called. Her voice was shaking. She whispered, "He's back. He's watching the house again." I froze. The memory of last summer came rushing back. The man in the mask, the one who kept leaving things on our porch. Dead birds, torn Polaroids of us sleeping, and once, a rusty hunting knife stabbed into our welcome mat. We called the police. They came, took our statements, and left. Nothing changed. He disappeared for a while, until now. I rushed home. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Fairview, Pennsylvania, the kind of place where people don't lock their doors until recently. Emily was waiting by the window, eyes red from crying. She pointed across the street. "He's standing right there, under the streetlight, watching." I looked. He was tall, in a long coat, face obscured by a hood. The second he noticed me looking, he stepped back into the shadows. I called the cops, again. They arrived 40 minutes later. By then, the man was gone. An officer named Briggs took our report. "We'll drive by a few times tonight, just in case," he said. I asked about cameras, patrols, protection. He shrugged. "Unless he breaks in, there's not much we can do." That night, we barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind set our nerves on edge. At around 3 a.m., Emily screamed. I ran to her room. There, on her windowsill, was a dead rabbit. Its eyes were gone. We moved her bed away from the window. I sat in a chair beside her all night, holding a baseball bat. The next day, I bought security cameras and installed them myself. I gave Emily pepper spray. We practiced using it. I even set up motion sensors around the backyard. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then, on the third night, the cameras caught him. He circled the house for 2 hours. He never touched the doors or windows, just walked, in loops, around and around. Sometimes he'd stop and look directly at the camera. We showed the footage to the police. Briggs looked uneasy. "It's creepy, sure, but again, unless he's trespassing or threatening you directly," I lost it. "He's stalking us! What does it take for you to do something? For her to be dead?" He offered to file another report. That night, Emily vanished. I came home from work, and the front door was wide open. Her phone was on the couch. The cameras, all disabled. Wires cut clean. I ran to the backyard. On the grass was a Polaroid of me, sleeping. I called the police, screaming into the phone. They came, asked questions, looked around. The usual. They issued an Amber Alert, even though she was 18. Days passed. No leads, no signs. I couldn't sit still. I checked online forums, cold case groups, anything. That's when I found the name, the Loopwalker. Stories from other towns, other sisters. Always the same pattern. Always a girl disappearing. I printed out everything, brought it to the station. They laughed me out, so I hunted alone. I rented a car, traveled to the towns where the other victims vanished. I mapped out the disappearances. They formed a shape, circles, spirals, always returning to one place, Pine Hollow, a ghost town in rural Ohio. I went. It was dusk when I arrived. Abandoned buildings, shattered windows, a post office full of moldy newspapers. I heard something. Footsteps. Not walking, circling. I followed them to an old schoolhouse. Inside in the basement was a room. A red lamp hung from the ceiling. And in the center, Emily, alive. She was tied to a chair, eyes wild. She whispered, "He's still here. He never leaves. He's watching right now." I turned. There he was, inches away. No mask. His face, it wasn't right. It was like someone had copied a human face but hadn't finished. I swung the bat. He vanished. Not ran. Vanished. Like smoke. We ran. Somehow got out. Drove for hours. The police didn't believe us. They said Emily had been hiding, that I imagined the rest. But every night now, I hear footsteps around my apartment, circling. I stopped calling the police. They can't help me. They never could. Second story. When the police couldn't help it started on a Tuesday night. I remember that because I had just gotten home from my late shift at the diner in Wilmington, North Carolina. The rain was tapping gently on the windows, and I had just made myself a cup of chamomile tea. Everything felt calm. Too calm in hindsight. My apartment is on the second floor of a 3-story building. Old place, creaky floors, weird plumbing, but it was home. That night, as I curled into the couch, I heard a noise outside, like someone dragging a bag across the hallway. Slow, deliberate, heavy. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, Mrs. Kilpatrick, but she moved out last month. I muted the TV. There it was again. Drag, pause, drag. My heartbeat quickened. I got up and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dim, flickering hallway light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. Around 3 a.m., I finally went to bed. I left the hallway light on. The next morning, I noticed deep scratch marks on my door. Not claw-like, more like someone used a knife or a screwdriver, carving into the wood. Long, jagged lines, almost symbols. I called the Wilmington Police Department. Officer Ramirez showed up an hour later. I liked her. She had a kind face, sharp eyes. She took photos, asked questions, and told me it was probably some kids messing around. "We'll patrol the area tonight," she said, "but you should be safe." Safe. That night I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I kept hearing that dragging sound. I thought I saw a shadow move past my window, but when I checked, nothing. Then the nightmares began. Every night I'd dream of standing in my hallway at the door. Something knocked, then whispered my name. And every time I tried to scream, nothing came out. On the fourth night, I woke up with bruises on my neck, real bruises, finger marks. I called the police again. This time, Officer Ramirez brought a colleague. They inspected the place, but there was no sign of forced entry. "You sure you didn't bump into something in your sleep?" he asked. I felt like I was going crazy. The next day, I bought cameras and set them up in my apartment. One in the hallway, one in my bedroom. That night, I slept with the lights on. At 2:42 a.m., I woke up gasping. The room was freezing. My cameras had shut off, not lost connection. Unplugged. I checked the hallway. The door was open, wide open. I ran, slammed it shut, and called the cops. Again, they arrived 20 minutes later. Ramirez looked worried now. They offered to let me stay in a hotel. I said no. I wanted to catch whatever it was. That night, I didn't sleep. At 3:15 a.m., something knocked on my door 3 times. Then a voice, raspy, too deep to be human, called my name. "Elliot?" I screamed. Police arrived, again, too late. They found nothing. But my camera caught it. Frame by frame, my door opening on its own, a tall, thin shadow entering. No features, just darkness. Then the footage cut. They took the video, promised to investigate, but nothing happened. A week later, Officer Ramirez stopped returning my calls. 2 weeks later, I was evicted. The landlord claimed I was disturbing the peace. I moved to Raleigh, new place, new locks. I thought it was over. Until last night, I woke up to a knock, 3 knocks and a whisper. "Elliot?" I called the police. They said this number is no longer in service. Then the power went out, and now I can hear the dragging again, getting closer. Please, if you're hearing this, don't call the police. They can't help you. They never could. Third story. When the Sirens Fell Silent. I never thought a quiet town like Willow Creek could hold a nightmare so deep that even the police would be powerless to stop it. But that night changed everything. It started as any other Friday evening. I was driving home from work, the streets dimly lit by old-fashioned lamps that flickered as if hesitant to shine. The air felt thick, almost heavy, like something was pressing down on the town. I passed the old mill, now shut for decades, but that night I swore I saw a shadow moving behind the broken windows. I shook it off, probably just my imagination. At home, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister, Sarah, who lived a few blocks away. "Something's wrong. Call 911 if you don't hear from me soon." My heart hammered. Sarah never panicked. I grabbed my keys and rushed out. When I reached her house, the porch light was smashed and the door was cracked open. Inside, everything was silent, but for the faint sound of something scraping against the floor upstairs. My hands trembled as I climbed the stairs. Then I saw it. Blood. Dark, thick, smeared along the walls. And Sarah? Gone. I called the police immediately. They arrived in minutes, flashlights cutting through the darkness, radios crackling with static. But as the officers fanned out, their confident faces slowly drained of color. "There's no sign of forced entry," one officer muttered. "And no trace of Sarah." We searched all night. No neighbors heard anything suspicious. No security cameras caught a thing. It was as if Sarah vanished into thin air. Days passed. I stayed glued to the phone, waiting for news that never came. The police kept visiting, But their questions became routine, their promises empty. That's when I started noticing strange things. A shadow lingering just out of sight, whispers echoing in the empty hallways of my house. I wasn't sleeping anymore. The fear gnawed at my sanity. One night, I heard footsteps outside my window, slow and deliberate. I called the police again. They showed up, but this time, their radios were dead. Their flashlights flickered and died. "We can't," one whispered, eyes wide with terror. Before I could react, the power cut out completely. I was plunged into darkness. And in that suffocating blackness, I heard her voice, Sarah's voice, calling my name. But it wasn't her. It was distorted, cold, filled with malice. The officers bolted. I was left alone, frozen. The next morning, the entire police force declared the case closed. No evidence, no leads. They warned me to stop making false reports. But I knew the truth. Something in Willow Creek was hunting us. Something beyond reason, beyond help. The police could not protect me. They were silent. I left town the next day, but even now, years later, I hear that voice in the wind. Sarah never came back. And the sirens? They never sounded for her. When the sirens fall silent, that's when the real terror begins. Fourth story, the silence beneath Pine Hollow. It all started one humid August evening in the sleepy town of Pine Hollow, South Carolina. I had just moved into my grandmother's old house after she passed away. It stood at the edge of town, nestled between towering pine trees that always seemed to whisper when the wind blew. I was hoping for a fresh start, away from the noise of Charlotte and the memories I couldn't escape. But something about Pine Hollow felt wrong. The locals were polite, but distant. They warned me, subtly, not to wander near the forest after dark. I laughed it off. City habits die hard. The first week passed without incident. I cleaned the dust-caked rooms, mowed the wild yard, and tried to settle in. But then came the scratching. It started on a Wednesday night. I was reading in bed when I heard a faint scratching from beneath the floorboards. I thought it was a raccoon or maybe a squirrel. But the noise returned the next night, louder, more frantic, closer. By Friday, it wasn't just scratching. I could hear whispers. They weren't clear, more like mumbling, as if someone was having a conversation right under my floor. I pressed my ear to the hardwood and froze. A woman's voice, soft and sobbing. "Let me out. Please, let me out." I called the police that night. Officer Granger and Deputy Mills arrived after 20 minutes. They were friendly, even joked a little when I told them what I heard. They checked the crawl space beneath the house, poked around with flashlights. "Nothing here but cobwebs and dirt," Granger said. "Maybe the wind playing tricks on you." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found scratches on the inside of the closet door in my bedroom. Deep, ragged marks, like someone had been clawing to get out. My heart pounded. I hadn't opened that closet since I moved in. I called the police again. This time, they didn't even come. "Sir, unless there's an emergency, we can't keep responding to house noises," the dispatcher said, her tone flat. That night, I dreamed of a woman trapped in the walls, her face pale, eyes hollow. She screamed, but no sound came out. When I woke, my walls were bleeding. I know how it sounds. Insane. But there were red streaks trailing down the hallway walls, sticky and warm to the touch. I took pictures, but when I looked at them later, the blood was gone. Just clean, white paint. I went to the sheriff's office myself, begged them to come back, showed them the photos. They humored me, said they'd file a report, and never followed up. The scratching returned that night. But now, it was coming from the ceiling. I tried recording the sounds. Nothing but silence on playback. Then things got worse. Furniture began to move on its own. Lights flickered in patterns. I heard crying behind the bathroom mirror. My reflection started smiling when I wasn't. One night, I found a trail of muddy footprints leading from the front door to my bedroom. I live alone. I stopped going outside. People in town avoided my eyes. Some crossed the street when they saw me. I began to wonder if they knew something they wouldn't say. Then I found the journal. It was hidden behind a loose plank in the attic. My grandmother's handwriting, shaky but legible. "They live beneath us," she wrote. "Old things, hungry. We made a pact long ago. Never dig, never listen, never answer." She had drawn symbols. Protection runes? I copied them, carved them into the floor of the walls, prayed. Nothing helped. I called the police one last time. I screamed at the dispatcher, told her there was something in my house, something evil. "Sir," she said, "we already sent someone. Weeks ago. Officer Granger never came back." I dropped the phone. The door slammed shut. Something was coming down the hallway. Slow, wet footsteps. I ran to the closet and locked myself in. It was the only place I thought might be safe. I'm writing this now with my phone flashlight on. There's something scratching outside the door. It knows I'm here. If anyone finds this, please tell the police. But don't expect them to help. They never could. And now it's too late. Fifth story, Whispers Beyond the Pines. I never thought the night of October the 12th would be the one that changed everything. I had just moved into a small town called Fair Hollow, nestled deep in the pines of northern Oregon. It was quiet, too quiet really, like the silence was hiding something. And it was. I had rented a cabin on the outskirts of town. I wanted peace, space to finish my novel, and maybe escape the chaos of the city. My nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away, and the only road that led to the cabin wound through miles of thick, dark woods. At first, the solitude was refreshing. Then, the knocking started. It was around midnight when I first heard it. A soft, rhythmic knock on the back door. I froze. Who the hell knocks at your back door in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere? I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door, my pulse racing. I flung it open. Nothing. Just wind rustling through the pines. I laughed it off, maybe a branch, maybe my imagination. But it happened again and again, every night, always at the same time, midnight. One night, I decided to call the police. I explained everything, the knocking, the strange footprints in the dirt, the feeling of being watched. The officer on the other end was polite but clearly dismissive. Probably just a coyote or some local kid pulling a prank. Lock your doors and try to relax. The next night, it escalated. It wasn't just knocking anymore. I heard whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs coming from just outside my windows. I turned off all the lights, grabbed my hunting rifle, and stood in the living room, staring out into the black woods. Then I saw him. A figure, tall and unmoving, standing at the edge of the tree line. I couldn't make out a face, only that he was wearing some kind of old coat, the kind you'd see in a Civil War movie. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched me. I called the police again. This time, they agreed to send a deputy. He arrived around 2 in the morning. He looked tired, irritated, and unconvinced. I told him what I saw. He walked around the property, kicked at some dirt, then shrugged. "There's no one here, sir. Just trees and shadows. You sure you're not overworked or maybe just jumpy being out here alone?" I felt like a crazy person. But I knew what I saw. The deputy left. That's when things truly turned. The knocking came back, louder than ever. My walls began to vibrate. The whispers turned into screams. Not loud, but like a chorus of voices pressed against the walls, begging to be let in. My lights flickered. The air turned cold. I was paralyzed. And then, silence. The next morning, I found scratches on the inside of my bedroom door. Long, deep gouges that hadn't been there before. And something else. A small bundle of twine and teeth left on my porch. Human teeth. I drove into town, demanded to speak to someone higher up. The sheriff sat me down and listened, this time more seriously. Then he told me something I'll never forget. "You're not the first," he said. "That cabin? It's been empty for years. Last guy who lived there disappeared without a trace. Before that, same story. And before that, we stopped responding to calls from out there because, well, we never found anything. Or anyone." I begged him to send help. He just stared at me. "You should leave, tonight." I didn't wait. I packed up, locked every door, and left before sunset. I drove straight through the night. I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. But even now, miles away in another state, I still wake up at midnight to knocking.